And some of you may already know this about me, but I like to start anytime I'm learning together with the bracha lasok b'divrei Torah for studying Torah. I think, it's helpful even while we're amidst all of our tefillot that we just, as we're about to turn to our sources, that we just ground ourselves, reminding ourselves why we do what we do when we gather together and learn Torah. I like to sing it. So I'm going to start on 999s, and feel free to join in whenever you're comfortable. 99999 99999 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah la'asok b'divrei Torah hafoch ba v'hafoch ba la'asok b'divrei Torah. Yai nai 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 nai, yai nai nai nai, yai nai 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 nai. So before we jump into the sources, I got a question from Paula, and I was actually thinking of addressing this. Just why these are the verses, why this is what I want to talk about today. So we're going to be looking at Parashat Tisa, and then something happening similarly, but also differently, in Megillat Esther. Now, fun fact about Parashat Tisa, while it was my bat mitzvah parsha, and it was also Rabbi Rebecca Schatz's bat mitzvah parsha. And it was when we had our bat mitzvahs, it was Tisa para. But there's just so much going on in Parashat Tisa, just like there is so much going on in Megillat Esther. And I think there's some hard parts that happen in both of them that I think when I was growing up, especially, kind of got glossed over. And this week, this just really stuck out to me because we're reading Tisa the same week that we are going to be celebrating Purim, which, as we were just discussing, is already on Monday night and Tuesday, which seems really quick that we arrived at Purim. And there's a lot of difficult parts in Tisa and Megillat Esther, and this one stuck out to me because it was in a moment of difficulty that two of our ancestors were really looking for resiliency and fighting for the survival of our people. So I want to look at something that Moshe does and something that Esther does. Now, of course, they're in completely different contexts. Moshe is fighting for the survival of our people in conversation with God, versus Esther, who's fighting for the survival of our people in conversation with Achashverosh, and Haman is also there too. So it's definitely different kinds of conversations, but it's similar in that both Moshe and Esther are fighting for our people. So I first just want to frame what's happening in Tisa when Moshe is pleading with God for our survival. So we're at the point in Tisa where Moshe has been up on Mount Sinai, up on Har Sinai, getting the law from God. And as you may be familiar with, we, the people of Israel, are down below. We've asked Aaron, to build us the golden calf. We are worshiping the golden calf. And God knows what's going on. Moshe doesn't exactly know what's going on, but Moshe knows that God is really angry with the people. And God says to Moshe, okay, your people, Moshe, have really crossed the line this time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to destroy your people that you brought out of Egypt, and we're going to restart the people with you. I didn't add that on the sheet, but I think that's, really, and this is also where God gives us, this is a phrase God gives us that I sometimes like to maybe embrace a little too much, Am Kshe Oref, that we're stiff-necked people, because this is really in a moment of anger that God says this about the people of Israel. And so God says, okay, Moshe, I'm going to destroy them, and I'm going to make of you a great nation. And this is when Moshe comes in and says to God, hold on, let's talk about this for a second. So is someone willing to read the English of Exodus 32:11 to 13? And again, as usual, if you're comfortable using the mic, use the mic. And we also understand if you're not and respect that. If you're comfortable, though, can someone pass the mic down so we can hear Exodus 32:11 to 13?
But Moshe implored God, saying, let not your anger, Hashem, blaze forth against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent they delivered them, only to kill them off from the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. Turn from your blazing anger and renounce the plan to punish your people. Remember that your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, how you swore to them by yourself and said to them, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give to your offspring this whole land of which I spoke to possess forever.
Thank you. So we're going to hold that plea that Moshe makes to God as we turn the page, and let's all stay on the same pages together, because when we turn to the commentary, they're going to start unpacking certain things. So let's just stay on the page with Esther and the picture of Moshe pleading with God somewhere up there. So now we enter into the Esther story, Esther 7, verses 3 to 4. And this is the feast where Esther is revealing to Ahasuerus, first of all, that she's a Jew, and also that her people, as Ahasuerus knows, her people, the Jewish people are, there's a plan to destroy them. And she is pleading with Ahasuerus to change that decree, or at the very least, she's letting him know what Haman has planned to do is going to affect me and my people. So is someone else willing to read in English verses Esther 7, verses 3 and 4? Does anyone want to read those verses?
Book of Esther, chapter 7, verses 3 to 4. Queen Esther replied, if your majesty will do me the favor, and if it pleases your majesty, let my life be granted me as my wish, and my people as my request. For we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, massacred, and exterminated. Had we only been sold as bondmen and bondwomen, I would have kept silent, for the adversary is not worthy of the king's trouble.
Thank you. So, of course, as I've noted, the context of these pleas for our people are very different, but I'm curious if you see in the tactics that Moshe uses and that Esther uses to fight for the survival of the people, what tactics are they using? Do you see similarities? Do you see differences? What are your reactions? And again, just to address Paula's question about why was I drawn to this, I think one of the things I was wondering is why, what is there a deeper meaning we can get from Ki Tisa being the week of Purim and what's going on with Moshe and Esther in these moments? So are there any thoughts, or if you want to take a little moment or two to think about how we can compare these two pleas for the people of Israel or the Jewish people?
I used the same tactics this week.
Oh yeah, are you comfortable taking the mic?
Negotiation tactic.
Are you comfortable taking the mic?
Oh.
Okay.
Esther's a smart negotiator. She's saying, well, don't kill us, just let us live, you know. Moses is basically saying, hey, you're going to be looked at bad for doing this because you just took us out of Egypt. So the two different, very nice negotiating tactics used.
Yeah.
I think it's always, well, if you have the power to do it, go for the whole enchilada, but if you know it, you better settle for something.
That's great.
Esther didn't have a whole lot of power.
Right. Thank you. Oh, so that's an interesting point. So of course, so we have a similarity, and they're using slightly different, but they're both using negotiating techniques, and that. But there's also a question of power. What power does Moshe have in the relationship with God? What power does Esther have in the relationship with Achashverosh? So that's interesting dynamic that we have to look at when we're pleading for survival.
Well, it seems like Moshe is like acting as a consultant.
Mm,
He's saying, you know, this is how they're going to look at you. He doesn't have really doesn't act like he has a horse in the race. You know?
yeah.
Whereas Esther, there's a real subtext there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just them; it's me too.
Mm,
You know, and I think that's probably a very powerful argument.
Yeah.
You know, so they're very different.
yeah, they are. And we're gonna come back to this when we look at the commentary, because there's certain language reasons why those differences, why Esther seems like hers is a higher stakes thing, and she has more skin in the game. We'll come back to that. That's an interesting point. Mm,
So Esther's going full on with the passive aggressive, with the toughest kissing, I've used this technique many times myself. But saying, would you be kind? Come on, you put it in letters too. Give me a break. We're being very, I wouldn't ask you if it weren't so important, type of thing. And Moses is like being far more assertive in his how he's asking God. He was like, you are going to come off looking like a jerk, looking evil. People are going to know, he's being far more assertive and she's being far more passive aggressive.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's really important when we're comparing Moshe and Esther, to remember the gender roles that are played and how they can speak and
Well, and how the
Yeah.
gender roles are in terms of the power that they have, the power dynamic.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Really cool. Yeah.
You have to know your audience.
Yeah.
That's the key. If one's talking to a king,
Right.
it's not his people, they're her people.
Right.
Why would she refer to them as his people?
Mm-hmm.
Moses is talking to God. It's God's people. We are God's people. I will say this, though, in response to your statement about being stiff-necked.
Yeah.
If we're being punished because we're stiff-necked, we've paid the price, because we are not as numerous as the stars of the sea, or the sands of the sea, or the stars of the
That's
sky.
true.
That's a prophetic statement.
Mm.
We represent what percentage of the United States? 2%. What
Right,
percentage of the
right.
world? Even less.
Right.
Well, I would say that has never been fulfilled for the Jewish people, and we paid that price for being
Wow.
stiff-necked,
Wow.
despite his pleading.
Yeah. Wow, I'm taking that in. That's a really powerful take to this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna sit with that.
I'd like to know, when in history have we been like the stars in the sky? I've never read it. I've never seen it.
Right. Yeah, thank
But
you.
we did get punished.
We did. We did. I'm gonna sit with that. I think that's a interesting theological question of we talk about retribution theology. So is this a continuation of a punishment?
It's not man's time, it's God's time.
God's time. Okay.
I don't know. We're still here, and the others are gone.
No, I get it, but
Right.
we are represent and have been for a very long time a minute people of the world. To say, as they do in the daily prayer, that we are like the sands of the sea and like the stars of the sky is prophetic at best. It's inaccurate at least. And I'm saying is that if she's saying that we were stiff-necked and that this was a response to the golden calf,
Yeah.
there is an argument that we have paid this price. It's a pretty dear price, because we don't represent. We're not the majority religion of the world. We're not the majority people of the world.
I'm gonna sit with this for a while, because I think both. I'm gonna sit with it, but my initial response is that both can be true. That We are a very small population in the United States and globally. And a question of, where does that come from theologically, and about the prophecies we got in the Tanakh about how numerous we would be, and also that we're still here, and what does that mean, that we're still here against all odds, and with all of the people, all of our ancestors constantly fighting for our survival. And I'm gonna sit with it. It's an interesting debate. Yeah.
I'm just going to, just a little off topic right here. I just want to know if anybody has ever addressed how Moshe knew to tell Hashem, remember your servants Abraham, Yitzchak, and Israel, how you swore to them by yourself and said to them, I will make you off. Like, how did he know this at this point in time, being raised in Egypt, being raised with, it's not like he grew up going to custom.
Right.
Right? Like, how, has anybody ever addressed that?
That's a really good question. How does Moshe know?
When? When?
What did you say? Oh, he was, yeah, he'd been standing at Sinai. He knew from Sinai. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm curious what commentators think.
I think just in general, Moshe had a lot more, knowledge and wisdom than most things. That might have just been, I don't know,
The whole
might have just been inherent.
right.
Prophet.
Yeah,
Well, it says
right.
that like Moses, he was human, but I prefer not to speak. No, it said that Moses, most people can't see the face of God. If they see the face of God, then they die, right?
Right.
Moses was one of the one who that didn't happen to. So there's something. I'm just saying there's something.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something different about Moshe. He has this innate divinity, this innate kind of humanliness.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And so
That-
we're talking about
that he just had this wisdom.
yeah,
He just
Moshe's wisdom and prophetic ability. Yeah.
knew. Yeah.
Thank you. Joey, you had something too?
No, you're fine.
Do you-
no.
Do you want the mic? Okay. And this will be our last comment in the room, and then if anyone on Zoom has a comment, we'll take that, and then we'll move on to the commentary.
It's not so much about the tactics, it's about
Yeah.
what prompted them.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think the golden calf was a worse thing, because it was it's like the Jews just wanted something visible to them that they wanted to worship, and that's blasphemy. Whereas in the story of Esther, we were under threat of being wiped out by Haman. So that's why I think those are different in that way too, not just the tactics.
Right. The circumstances are really important in
Right.
looking at both of our ancestors' fight for our survival. That the Haman thing came externally, and there was, to our mind, we would say, there's no good reason. The reason Haman gave was that Mordecai wouldn't bow to him, and so if Mordecai is bad, bad to Haman's understanding, then all Jews must be. So it's a totally different thing than do we have any accountability in the Kitisa situation. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to consider. Does anyone on Zoom want to share anything at this point in terms of looking at what Moshe and Esther did in pleading for our survival? Okay, so we're going to turn the page over to two commentaries that I've put in conversation with each other, even if they weren't actually. Of course, Rashi coming before Malbim wouldn't know what Malbim would say, but Malbim most probably knew what Rashi said, but they're in different, addressing, again, Parashat Kitisa and Megillat Esther. So would somebody like to read what Malbim said? We are, I think it was actually brought up in our discussion about how Moshe is referring to the people of Israel as your people to God, whereas Esther is referring to the Jewish people as my people. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this yet, about when I talk about, you may be familiar with this, when I talk about the context of Kitisa, I talk about the people of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, because that was how we were called in the Tanakh, and the Torah. And then when we get to Megillat Esther, we shift a little bit in the language, because this is like a fun fact that you might get at some Jewish trivia game sometime if you play Jewish trivia, that Mordecai is the first person to be called the Jew. So when we get to Megillat Esther, we talk about the Jewish people. So does someone want to read what Malbim has to say about Moshe calling the people of Israel your people to God? Thank you.
Against your people, God had said, your people have become corrupt, referring to the mixed multitude whom Moshe took out of Egypt on his own authority. Moshe replied, if only my people have sinned, why are you angry at your people?
Thank you. Yeah. So Malbim is pointing out how Moshe is trying to turn it. I sometimes think of this when I look at these verses where God says to Moshe, hurry down for your, so this is God speaking to Moshe, Exodus 32:7. Hurry down for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. And then Moshe turns it around and says, let not your anger, Adonai, blaze forth against your people whom you delivered from the land of Egypt. When I look at that back and forth between God and Moshe, I sometimes think of, I'm not a parent myself, but when parents have a child that's misbehaving and one parent will say to the other, well, do you know what your son did? And the other one says, no, your son. So that's what it makes me think of a little. Okay, so that's Malbim's explanation. And before we discuss a little bit, I want us to look at Rashi's explanation for Esther saying my people. So does someone else want to read Rashi's explanation?
Oh, you want me to do it?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and my people shall be given me in my request that they should not be slain. Now, if you ask, what does it concern you? My answer is, for how can I bear to see the disaster which will befall my people? And how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?
Thank you. So the thing I just want to say also about Rashi's commentary here is that he's bringing in what Esther says in the next chapter, in chapter 8, because as we know, just because Haman gets executed doesn't mean that the decree to the plot to kill the Jews goes away. And that brings us to the very bloody end of the Megillah and the big war where the Jews are given permission to defend themselves, but the decree is not able to be overturned. And so I think Rashi bringing in that verse, it's bringing in an extra, like, you know, Moshe is going back and forth with God in this moment, but Esther has to do an extra, it's not, this is again where it matters who they're both talking to. Moshe's talking to God and God gets to have the final say in what happens to the people, but Achashverosh, as only a human king, does not actually have full control of the situation. So what I wanted to discuss with these commentaries is I'm curious if you agree with the commentators' understandings of why Moshe would refer to the people of Israel as your people, and Esther would refer to the Jewish people as my people. There are obviously the obvious contextual reasons that we discussed earlier, maybe not so obvious, but that we discussed earlier. And but in terms of the layer that Malbim and Rashi bring to it, or would you add or change anything to their explanations? And you can take a moment. Mm-hmm.
It's simpler than that. God was saving his people. He was bringing his people out of the land of Egypt with an outstretched arm.
Mm-hmm.
The Jewish people have no relationship to Ahasuerus.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's no need, like, it would make no sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Sure.
But
Yeah.
she has a relationship with the king,
Mm-hmm.
you see. So if you don't want me to be upset, and if you don't want me to be mourning, yes, you better do something for my people.
Right.
I mean, that's really what's going on.
Yeah, right. Are there any other thoughts on how the commentators take it, whether they extra complicated or whether they made you have another thought as to the thing I'll just share that I was thinking about was I think Esther can't really say to Ahasuerus, your people, that wouldn't make sense. But is there, like, you know, I brought up the parent analogy, but are there other reasons why Moshe might be reminding God, these are your people, in terms of the negotiation strategy or power dynamics, any of those things we were talking about earlier?
heard of God speaking to God.
Yeah.
Here he took him out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And they melt the gold and put a calf.
Mm.
Forget about him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a natural reaction. I would have forgotten about him. So he's kind of just reminding him of the greater goal.
Yeah, the bigger
We don't
picture.
want God to overreact.
Yeah. Thank you. So we're having Moshe remind God of the bigger picture. Thank you.
Or, using the parent analogy, I mean, God is the parent of the individual and reminds him, just like all of our parents, there's been wrong about that earth. Sorry, you don't have kids. If your kid misbehaves or something's wrong with your kid or they do something wrong, yeah, you get pissed off at them. Yeah, you want to discipline them. But also, are their parent. You still love them unconditionally. Just reminding God of his connection
Mm-hmm.
to his people.
Right.
Unconditional connection.
Thank you.
Stop being angry at them. They made a mistake. Give them a hug. Set them on the right path.
Okay. Thank you.
Don't throw him out of the house.
Okay, we'll take 3 more comments and then we're gonna do a little. I'll send you home with some reflection questions. Do we want to pass the mic? Okay, you take the mic and then
Something in
yeah.
response to what
Yes.
Miss Lepson just
Yeah.
said. It is the province of relationships between God and his children, between parent and children, as the only unconditional relationship. It is why parents visit their children in prison, despite overwhelming sins. I mean, they still have parents, and parents do this regularly. And I'm saying is, but the husband and wife relationship is always conditional. It always is conditional. And what she's presenting to him is a condition.
Yeah.
My love is conditional. I need my people. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Because the parent love is unconditional. That's what Sandra's painting.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really helpful lens to view this through, is the parent relationship and the marital relationship.
Remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. In other words, it's by the merit of your ancestors.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big,
I've been going for this ratio there.
Thank you. Yeah. So remember your ancestors. Yeah, that's
by the merit.
by the merit of
your ancestors.
by the
Not by
merit
your merit, but by the merit of.
by the merit of the ancestors.
Now, I don't know exactly what that means, but I know it plays a big part in all of our.
Right.
Who also weren't perfect.
Right.
That's a whole
But I
other
think
discussion.
that's a good.
I said who also weren't perfect,
Right.
by the way, but that's a whole other discussion.
But I think that's a good thing to sit with. Another thing I'll go home and think about is, what does it mean that we're constantly calling upon the merit of our ancestors? I think that's a really important point. Thank you. And Joey?
Yeah. It kind of flies in the face of that verse in this morning's Haftarah where it said God's not one to change his mind.
Can you say that again? Wait, can we pass the mic?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and the sort of Saul and Samuel.
Yeah.
It says there's this verse that says that God doesn't change God's mind, but this kind of flies in the face of that.
Yeah, it's actually really great for us that God did change, that Moshe changed God's mind on us, right? Thank you. That's a good reminder. Does anyone want to say anything from the Zoom room? Oh wait, if Gary, if you're talking, you're muted. Okay. Okay, well, we can talk another time about it. But so I want to just send us off into the week with the reflection questions at the bottom that I'll just read to us, and it's just more. I feel like there's a lot I've gotten out of the discussion that I'll be going home with. So just a few things that you might want to go home with and think about during the week as we're reading Parashat Tisa, as we're reading the Megillah Monday and Tuesday. So one of the questions I've been sitting with is, are we fighting for the survival of our people or God's people still today? And if so, in what ways? Is it similar to how Moshe and Esther were in the physical survival, or is it maybe more metaphorical? Or you might think we're not fighting for our survival anymore. And if we're not, then I'm curious when you might think that stopped. Maybe never. Something to think about. Another question I'm going to be reflecting on is whether you might use Moshe's tactics, Esther's tactics, a combination or neither in fighting for survival, for the survival of our people. Whether it would depend on external circumstances, like we were talking about the context of both of their fights for survival. Would it depend on your internal relationship with Judaism, with God? Maybe it would depend on something else. And within the context of fighting for survival, would you claim the Jewish people as my people? If only sometimes you would make this claim, when would you claim our people as my people, and when would you not? Would there be strategic reasons not to? And what about outside of the context of fighting for survival, just, the claiming of the people as my people or God's people or Amkshe Oref, anyway. So I hope that we have gained some little bit of courage or resilience from the examples of Moshe and Esther. I appreciated, as always, learning with this group. And